like to welcome welcome Ryan to the stage. Ryan and I first started talking about years ago. You were one of the first people I spoke to. He had a blog, and he was practicing Portuguese and Spanish, and we all used to have these group conversations with Luca, myself, and Ryan. We used to talk for hours, and just sort of we've seen each other develop in different ways, I guess, haven't we?
Yeah.
Changing in career and different things that we've done. It's been a real evolution of our lives.
I agree.
So it's particularly great to see him in person, and I really appreciate the distance you've travelled to come here, to be here and to present. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So I'm going to let you take this mic in case this one gives up like yesterday. And yeah, welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to take this as well. I think what Richard is referring to there is friendship. And that's genuinely what I feel for him, and what I felt from quite a few of you before I came here today. I think, and now that I've gotten to meet so many of you, the thing is, when I do speak in conferences, I don't always get a chance to meet people ahead of time. And what's been wonderful is to spend time with you breaking bread, as it were. There's something special about that that's almost universal in every culture. There's something special about sitting down with somebody and sharing a meal. And that's been really great. I'd like to elicit a little bit of participation, if I could. And I would like some honesty. How many of you honestly feel that when you see the word conflict, how many of you really feel that that can be a bad thing? Just raise your hands real quick. Okay. Okay. How many of you feel that that can be a good thing? Conflict is good. Okay. All right. Smart group. I'm not surprised. But there were few. Just for those of you who don't have my view, there were fewer hands coming up for the good. So let's talk about that just real quick, because when you talk about conflict management, when I started studying conflict management years ago, my concept of conflict management was one thing, and now it's quite another. So when I talk about conflict management, I might not have the same definition as you do. So let's say you want to buy some paper. Let's say you work for a law firm. You go through a lot of paper, and you go to a salesman. Now, let's say there is no conflict. He thinks the price is high. You think the price is high. How does that work? Not very well, right? Now, if you're in a pinch, you'll hire him, but are you going to stay with him? Not if you can find the same quality elsewhere. It doesn't matter how nice he treats you. No, it doesn't matter how good the customer service is. You think it's high. Perception is reality. You feel it's high. You're going to go look for somebody else. Now, let's say there's conflict. You think that the price is low. You think it's a deal. He thinks that the price is high. He's over the moon about the commission he's gaining off of this. He's going to treat you well, and you're going to stay with him. This is sustainable business, and I, in my profession, am very interested in sustainable business, ideas that work well over time. Let's say, so another example, let's say that there's a nice young couple. They're looking for an apartment together, and let's say there's absolutely no conflict in what they're looking for. They just want an apartment that is in a nice neighborhood. And so they get an apartment in a nice neighborhood, and then they're stressed because it's far away from where both of them worked. They have a long commute, it's very tiring, they see each other very little. Well, if there's a conflict, one says, I want an apartment that's in a nice neighborhood, that's what's important to me. The other one says, I want an apartment that is close to where we work. Well, that means a little bit more work up front, but then you get an apartment that's in a nice neighborhood, or a neighborhood that you like anyway, that's close to where you work. Conflict. So to me, that's conflict. And when I talk about conflict today, that's included in conflict. One more quick example. Let's say you're a top world-class chef. What is important to you when you're starting your first restaurant? You were a sous chef, but now you're going to be the head chef. What's important to you? Just shout it out.
Customers.
Customers. Well, yes.
Good stuff.
Good stuff. That's it. Quality. You want the best ingredients. You want the best kitchen staff.
Freedom.
You want freedom to make what. This is your restaurant. You want, right, to put the menu. Maybe you want to have different menus. Now, if you're a restaurateur, if you're a business person who invests in restaurants, what are you thinking of? Money, right? What's the profit margin on this? Where's the location? Can we market this? Are there 18 other restaurants that do the exact same thing, right? So you could say that's a conflict, and it is. But you put those two people together, and what you get is a fabulous, world-class restaurant that doesn't go out of business in 6 months to a year, like many small businesses do, right? So I would like to argue today and present to you the idea that conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think most of the time when we think of conflict, we think of things like this, don't we? When it comes to negative conflicts, there are also lots of examples. I decided to pick one that's more contemporary. So in Syria, in a country of 22 million, between 70,000 and 140,000 have been killed since the conflict began a couple years ago. The range is that big because we don't know. We can't trust many of the sources we're getting, and the sources that are more trustworthy say they're not sure. Between 1.2 million, and that comes from the EU, and 2 million people have been displaced. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Arguelles. I had the opportunity, fortunately I'm from California, and so when he was, as he called it, a refugee, and he really was, in his own country, he was working as a professor in Lebanon, and I went to go visit him in Berkeley, and he talked to me about how he had been bombed out, had to look at his family and go, okay, what can we bring? A couple suitcases. We got to leave the rest. And those are the lucky ones. So it's not necessarily whether or not you're going to have conflict, because you are. The question is, what type of conflict are you going to have? What do you do with that conflict? So that's what I'm going to talk about here, and I beg your patience. We'll talk about how this relates to you specifically as language learners, or perhaps other people that you know. So, let's take another example here, a little fictional story that hopefully will feel quite real to you. So you've got newscasters, right? And a young one gets brought on from a lower regional television station, gets brought on to the big national one. And there's to work with someone who's been in the business for years, kind of an institution, and the new one signs up for her or his contract, does a lot of reporting in someplace interesting, writes a book about it, and it's a bestseller. A couple months later, the boss notices that the person who's been there a long time, the anchor who's been there forever, and the new person start to get snippy. The professionalism, even the professionalism behind cameras, gets nasty. There's this chill when you walk into work. And I just want you to think, if you've had that experience, whether because you had a conflict with somebody at work, or let's say you didn't. Let's just say you knew of a conflict that was going on at work. What happens to performance? What happens to the way people work? The creativity goes out the door. And then it starts to spill onto in front of the cameras. So what you could do is you could have somebody come in, there's a conflict, right? So you got to deal with that. Otherwise it's just going to get worse. And so what happens is a boss or maybe a third party calls the two people together and says, okay, what's the deal? What do you think they're going to say? Right? Right? Do you think they're going to say nice things? Let's say this has been going on for 6 months, maybe a year. So he asks the new one. And the new one says, well, I don't feel appreciated. I just wrote this big bestseller, and he's just full of himself. He thinks because he's been here longer that he should get most of the time. I'm a rising star, I need to get my time. Well, how does that make the person who's been there longer feel? What is is reconciliation on this person's mind? Okay, so interestingly enough, a skilled mediator with the current most common methods can take those two people and help them come to some type of agreement. And they'll still work together. But how are things at the office? They both say, yes, we'll continue to work together, but how much have things really improved? It's not sustainable quite often. And so that's the type of conflict management I work in. Interpersonal. I had the good fortune of studying party-directed mediation under its developer, Gregorio Bilikoff, who's a wonderful Chilean man who works for the University of California. And so I'm going to tell you just a little bit about that, and perhaps some better ways that we can manage conflict. I'm going to borrow a lot from Reverend Desmond Tutu. I think he has some very important things to say about reconciliation. Just briefly, for those of you who don't know, he spoke out tirelessly and intelligently against the apartheid in South Africa, but his was a voice for reconciliation, not vengeance. So he said, if you want to make peace, you don't talk to your friends, which is what we do when we get into a conflict, isn't it? The first thing you do, somebody ticks you off at work, maybe one of your friends makes you angry, you go and talk to your other friends, you go and talk to your family, and of course they agree with you, almost always, because they only know the story from your side. Makes you feel justified, makes you feel strong. Are you looking to get reconciliation? No, you're looking to bowl the other person over. So that doesn't help, going to talk to your friends. What you want to do is talk to your enemies. As counterintuitive as that feels, or as that seems, that's where you're going to get reconciliation. So, what I do is I prepare the people to come together so they can talk their issues out. I remember when I first started learning about this, I thought, this is nuts. They're going to tear each other apart. They're going to get into a shouting match. Maybe that's what this is about. Maybe this is about being kind of a referee at a shouting match. Didn't sound very nice. So what do we do? Well, I want you to think about any type of sports you've done, or perhaps even a sports movie if you're not much into sports, a team sport specifically. What is it that the coach generally does before a big game? Yeah, he gives you a big speech, he encourages you, plays loud music. Why?
To get you into an aggressive.
Exactly. Just like I loved Carol's talk yesterday when she was talking about NLP. Now, if you've got one person who's got a certain level of ability, who has been training hard and long, that person has a good skill set, especially when you get into professional levels. And yet, what kind of performance is that person going to have in any sport, or in, let's say, football? They start the game like this. I mean, you remember when she had us all sit down like that? Now try to be happy. Be happy on the inside. It's hard. So one of the big problems that we have when we're bringing people together in conflict and trying to help facilitate the reconciliation process is they're in the wrong state of mind. Look, have you ever had the experience perhaps when a friend has come to you and talked to you about a problem? You know what the answer was immediately. And you're shocked as to why it is that person can't figure it out. There may be 5 good options. Well, and then you give them a solution. And you think, I've helped this person. What a good friend I am. What a good brother I am. What a good sister I am, right? Good parent. And they come back to you in 2 weeks, and they talk to you about the same problem. And they tell you about it almost verbatim. Crazy. Well, there's a reason for that. So that they're in the wrong state of mind. This intelligent, capable human being, who is capable of many things, including reconciliation, is just in the wrong state of mind. Okay? Look at the great Tiger Woods. After he had that personal, he was in a personal tailspin, right? Performance. Did he suddenly become a bad golfer? I fully expect the guy to be back on top and just blowing everybody away again. But the guy needs to get, as we say in the States, his head in the game. Well, that's the first step in helping people in reconciliation, is doing just that, helping them get their heads in the game. So what you need to do is, the reason you act that way The reason you say, oh, that person's acting like an animal, is because you've gone into an animal state of mind, right? When we perceive a threat, whether it's psychological or physical, we go into the fight, flight, or freeze response. And frankly, even if you see a mountain lion, it's not always a good state of mind to be in. What's good is it lets you know that you shouldn't go up and hug it, but you're not in a state for reconciliation. So the first thing you need to do is help this person feel psychologically and physically safe. Well, the physical part's generally not that hard. You find a good neutral spot to be able to talk to the person. You get enough time. You set aside enough time to really talk about things where they're not going to get texts and phone calls every 2 minutes. That's pretty easy. The next thing is you have to establish confidentiality. No matter what you say, I will not talk to your boss about it. No matter what it is. I'm not going to talk to anybody about this. I'm not going to talk to my wife about this, much less your colleague with whom you have a conflict. That's another thing. And then the next one is a little bit more tricky. It's simple in concept, a little bit more difficult in application. So you've got a dam here, right? How much pressure is this structure under, with the water being more or less the same level on either side? Yeah, pretty much zero, right? But what happens when if the water on this side, say, were to drop in level, say 50%? What would happen to the water over here? Yeah, right? So, and the bridge would be under a lot more strain. Well, this is what happens to us emotionally. Not only when we're feeling something negative, but also when we're feeling something positive. Has that ever happened to you? Somebody comes, maybe you've come home and you had a great day and you want to tell everybody about it. And they say, oh, but this happened to me. No, I'm still talking, right? There's so much emotion that needs to come out. Well, that happens with somebody who's in a negative state of mind. Has had to build up, especially people who've been in an intense conflict for 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I've worked with these people. It needs to come out, and it's all they can do to keep the emotion from just spilling out. So what you need to do, just like they do with these dams, is you need to have a safe way for the tension to be released. And what I use for that, because otherwise you get this.
All right.
And this is what happens on the job. And there are careers that are lost over this. Talented people that were, just a year before, very valuable to their companies, and who were wonderful contributing members of their family, just go out of control. Because they think, I can handle it. I can just do it. And they suppress all that emotion. This is what PTSD is. There's only so much you can do. There's really only so much you can suppress for so long. So what you do is a technique called reflective listening. It was developed by American psychologist called Carl Rogers. And what you do is you listen to the person. And it's I generally have a day seminar that's just on this. But in a nutshell, what you do is you just listen. You're completely present. You're completely focused. You do not judge the person. You do absolutely nothing with words or with body movements to suggest that you are judging them in any way, shape, or form. And you don't need to be a psychologist to do this. And I encourage that when you come across someone who has this tremendous amount of emotion that's just built up, do this. Just listen. Don't judge. Don't criticize. Don't problem solve. They're not ready for that yet. Just listen. And don't agree with them. Okay, because we just talked about that. That's one of the problems when we get into a conflict. So I don't agree with them. I don't sit there and go, oh, you're right, that person's a jerk. Why did they not fire that person long ago? No, I don't say that. You don't agree, you don't disagree. You listen. And when that person, you see, how many of you have had someone listen to you, really listen, look you in the eye and listen when you had something important to say, not get distracted, not look at their watch. When I do this, I bite my tongue if I have the urge to yawn because I don't want them to think I'm bored. How many of you have had that experience where somebody talked listen to you for more than 60 seconds straight without interrupting you? Raise your hands. Really? Okay, yeah, thank you, goodness. So you poor people, not even 60 seconds. How about 5 minutes? Okay, how about 10 minutes? An hour? That's good. Ah, yes, yes. Well, you put in your dues. That's part of it. That's one of the best things I ever did was teach my wife how to do this. Really. People ask me, "What, Ryan? Going into this career, what has this done for your marriage?" Wonders, wonders. Honestly. Sometimes people need that. When Robert gave such a wonderful presentation, when you've got that kid who was a child soldier, and watched those people butcher his parents. How much emotion is behind that? He needs somebody to listen. And even if you haven't been through something that traumatic, you need somebody to listen. So, and what that does is, I don't know if you've had this experience, but how many of you have ever thought, or maybe even said to a friend, "Can you hear yourself?" Anybody? I have. Yes, thank you. All right. Honesty. Love it. They can't. And when you're in the state, you can't really hear yourself either. You can, but you can't. What's amazing about this process is when you're not feeling judged and when someone's not agreeing with you, you can start to hear yourself. The tension is released, and then you start to get clarification. Wait a minute. That sounded good in my head. Now that I said it, I realize it's not that bad. Or it's worse. You start to get clarification. Unfortunately, when you bring the two conflicting parties together right away, they just start talking. All that emotion starts coming out because they've got the boss there, or they've got some type of authority figure. And again, when you're watching football, when do they actually start throwing punches? So when their buddies come from behind them and start holding them back, then they're really, really strong. Well, the same thing happens quite often when you bring two conflicting parties together. Oh, well, the boss is here. She's not going to say what she really thinks. I'm going to get in a... So that doesn't happen when the tension's released. So they start to say, oh, and they get that clarification, and they start to come out of that animal-like thought process, that animal-like state of mind. They're still not happy with what's going on. Remember, I don't judge, I don't tell them what to think. All I do is help them release the tension at this stage. And what's amazing is at this stage, they themselves start to notice all of these things that for the rest of us who are not in the conflict can say, oh, well, there's a solution. Well, maybe it's because of that. So now, just real quickly, I'd like to, so then we get to the next stage, and Reverend Tutu is going to help me with this. He's actually quoting his father here. He says, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. So that's the next stage. Now that the tension is released, now that we're in more of a rational state of mind, I help them improve their argument. And to illustrate that, I'd like to tell a story that's happened to a professional teacher at Georgetown University in the U.S. who, before she started teaching negotiation at university level, she was in the Peace Corps in Africa, and it was Thanksgiving time, and she's like, well, okay, honestly, in my travels, it's been kind of depressing to see everybody take Halloween from us. But then again, we got it from the Irish, and what is originally American anyway? But Thanksgiving is one of the few holidays that we have that's ours, and we really started with it. And so she wanted to make a traditional Thanksgiving feast for these people that she knew. And for that, you really do need a good pumpkin pie. So she goes to the market, and she sees there's only one stall that's selling pumpkins, and there are 4 of them. Brave lady, trying to make it from scratch. Nobody tries to do that anymore, almost. And so she goes to the stall, and she's like, all right, I'll take it all. And you'd think if you're selling produce goes bad. That's a good thing, right? You want to get rid of it. And the lady's like, you can have 3. 3? What do you mean you have 3? Look, no. Now, what she starts to do here is what I like to call emotional chicken. For those of you who have seen this stupid tradition that is kind of dying out in the U.S., it's kind of like modern jousting. maybe you've seen this in movies. You get two cars, two very stupid people who are trying to show their bravery, and they start in a lone road somewhere, and they start driving at each other at full speed. This is what we do quite often when we negotiate, right? And so he who swerves first loses. Now I have some problems with this, but first let me illustrate what she does. So she starts. So you've got the great jackass theory of humanity. You either motivate people with a stick or with a carrot, right? Positive, negative, treating people like animals. And so that's what she does to this lady. And she says, all right, so she tries guilt. That's a good motivator. Oh, come on, I'm so far away from home and Thanksgiving's coming up and I have all these people to cook for. I really need that fourth pumpkin. No. Okay. Heck, so the stick didn't work. Well, then you up the ante, right? The cars start to get closer. Okay, fine. I'm an American. I must be made of money. I'll pay you double. How about that? No. Well, see, what's wrong with this type of negotiation, and we've all done it, by the way, is, okay, so let's say you win, right? How does the person who swerved and gave in to you feel about you? Horrible, right? So when you've swerved, when you've had that, you feel something's important, the other person feels something important, and you swerved, you gave in, fine, I'll be a martyr and let you have your way. What does that do to the relationship? Again, it's unsustainable. It's just an unsustainable way to have interactions with other human beings. So if you're in a long-term relationship with somebody, whether it be business or personal, it's just not good. Eventually, you're going to have to pay for it. Whether you give in all the time, or whether you're the one making people get out of your way. Well, it didn't work for her. And so she did something very smart. She asked a better question. She said, ma'am, why will you not sell me this fourth pumpkin? And the one said, I don't have any seeds. If I'm going to be able to sell pumpkins next year, I need to take seeds from this last pumpkin. I can't sell them all to you. Well, there we go. Can you think maybe of a couple of solutions that she could come up with? Oh, well, to tell you what, let's make a deal. I'll just pay normal price for that fourth one, and I'll let you have all the seeds from all four. What we do a lot of time. So that's how I help people improve their arguments. I help them figure out what is important to them. So instead of saying, no, I'm not going to sell you this pumpkin, which gets you nowhere, this lady was going to lose, she was going to miss out on a sale. Instead of just saying no or yes, and then saying no or yes again more strongly, what you do is you help the two sides go, all right, well, what is it that you want? Why is that important to you? And you see, just like in this situation, you say, well, I'm saying no because I need the seeds. All right. Is there any way that you could get the seeds? And just going through that process of just asking them why something is important, quite often they figure it out on their own. Oh, I can sell the pumpkin without selling the seeds. Or I probably could. Maybe I could ask them about that. Yeah, maybe you could. People are actually very intelligent once they come out of that animal-like state of mind. And if they don't, it's a low-hanging fruit, sometimes I help them. But so we make a list of all their issues, what the problems are, why it's important to them, what are they afraid of, what is it they want to get out of it. Because when you break it down, you can usually find many different solutions where both sides get what they want. Where one side gets all the pumpkins and the other side gets to keep all the seeds. So after that, what's amazing is at this point, so I come and go. When you do this type of work, you come and go. You're a third party. They don't see you otherwise. And what's neat is the relationship starts to improve on its own. I haven't brought them together yet. They haven't talked to each other yet about any of this. And then you ask, well, how are things going? Oh, so-and-so is so much nicer now. Oh, so-and-so, this is just so much easier. Work is so much easier. Do we really have to talk together? They don't want to do it. They don't want to rock the boat. Things have improved. So here's the thing, though. We need to still work on some weak assumptions. So by this time, I've earned the right to challenge, not tell them what to think, just to challenge certain weak assumptions. So I had a weak assumption challenged once. I come from California. There are a few Mexicans there. And I was driving through a part of my hometown that is really Little Mexico. I mean, you see Mexican flags flying, Spanish all over the place. The biggest, and one of the fastest growing supermarket chains in California is Mi Pueblo Foods. Just like that, Mi Pueblo Foods. Where you pay marked up prices for authentic Mexican food, and they're willing to pay it. Anyhow, so I need to get some gas. I do drive. And so I stop and I get in line to pay. And you know, in the States, there are a lot of gas stations are run by immigrants, and they're family-owned businesses. It's fine. And there's this kid, 15, 16 years old, standing behind the cash register. And there's this right in front of me. This guy stands up. It's his turn, and he gets out a $20 bill, and he says, 20 en el 10. Now, in this part of town, Spanish is fine. He's used to being able to, that's why they stick around in that part of town. They don't, everything's easier for them. And just like expats do here in America, here in Budapest, I've run into some of them, and they don't learn Hungarian. They just go to the stores where they know people speak English. And that's what this guy does. And 20 en el 10, right? Now, if you took 2 years of Spanish, even in the public school system, you learned your numbers. 20, right? 20. En el 10. Now, even if you didn't understand en el, you heard 10. Now, what is it you do all day? If you're working at a cash register, you hear people say, okay, I want 20 on the 10. Station number 10, right? And I'm thinking, you don't need to have great Spanish to understand what this guy's saying. But this young man had brown skin and was looking at the man going, huh? And I got mad. Because I had several friends who grew up in these in at least bilingual environments, and I always thought, how cool is that? I mean, even when my Filipino American friend, when his friend's mom would come in, and he didn't take out the garbage or something, and she just come into him. That's what I understood. That was Tagalog for me. And then he's just responding, no, I did it on Tuesday. I just thought that was so cool, and I got so mad because there are some kids in the States. They reject the culture of their parents. They reject that language, and the thing is, come on, you understand that your parents speak Spanish to you at home. You understand. Even if you didn't understand, you're taking Spanish in school, and 20 en el 10. How hard is that? And then so I'm getting angry, and I'm about to like come up and have a chat with this young man and help this poor guy. I have a lot of respect for the Hispanic immigrants in the United States. Before and after I've spoken Spanish, they have not always, generally almost always I've found them to be kind, hardworking, fun people. And I hate to see them be mistreated, or at least treated in an unfair manner. So I was about to go do that, be the defender of justice, and presumably the young man's father, or an adult, comes behind him and says something in Arabic. So this kid wasn't Mexican at all. It was brown skin. I read my own biography into that, didn't I? My own autobiography. I made assumptions. Now, please be kind. Please don't judge me. We all do this. We never have all the facts. In our observations, we never have all the facts. So we have to make assumptions. But what I do at the end, towards the end of this process, is I start to look at some of their assumptions that are weak, and I don't tell them, you're wrong, because maybe they're right. But I just ask them, well, you say you know this person has been talking behind your back. How do you know that? And then the person generally understands, oh, I guess I don't know that. I don't know that. I suspect it. I mean, I saw these two people talking, and they were whispering, and they looked at me a couple of times, but I don't know they were talking about me. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. And you start to give room for doubt and give people the benefit of the doubt. Now, if this person was a monster, you can't do that. And finally, we start to do some role-playing. So because we've been teaching them negotiation skills. I've been teaching them skills for questioning their narrative about what's been going on. So I start to role-play with them. This is how it's going to go when you come and meet with the person. There's a reason for this. So the person can go in with more confidence, but it's also because, I don't know how many of you know who Wyatt Earp is? Yes, okay. So for those who don't, he was a real guy, and he was a Wild West lawman, and he's portrayed in movies and TV shows as being the type who would, gunslinger, impeccably dressed, comes up and tells the bad guys to stop doing what they're doing, and then they don't, and then he pulls out his gun and kills them all, 20 of them, and he just mows them all down. That's not really how it was. Wyatt Earp did get into gunfights, and he was quite good, and he got out of some, there's some big legends told about how, there were bullet holes through some of his waistcoats that didn't actually pierce him. But here's why he was in demand in the Wild West. So you got all these cowboys who would, take the cows down from point A to point B. And usually young guys, they get all their money at the end. And that's why you had these towns that popped up back then over the U.S., along these different trails and such. Because, now look, you got a bunch of 16-year-old, maybe 18-year-old guys. They've been out on the range by themselves. It's been hard living, and they get into town, and they get all their money at once. You want them to stick around and spend their money in your town. You get it. It's a windfall. So you don't want a lawman to come in and say, behave yourselves, and then shoot them all, because then they're not going to spend their money. So what he was really good at, and this is why he was in high demand, got paid very well, because he was very good at getting them to check their guns at the door. Or rather, actually, as they came into town, boys, you please check your guns. He was able to talk people out of their guns. Well, it's in the role play where I start to just test them a little bit to see how they'll react if somebody says something bad or unthinkingly. And then it comes out, and I found out, oh, they got a gun. They still got a gun down there strapped to their shoe. Oh, they still got a knife. And so that we can work through those issues so that they can still say what it is that they don't like, but instead of saying, I think you're a jerk and I hate your guts, we can talk about what the real issue is. Honestly, frankly, openly, just not offensively. I learned that you can be clear without being offensive. You can be frank without being mean. It is possible. So that's what we do, get them to check their guns at the door. And so then by that time, it's a lot of work. But what's wonderful about that is you bring them together, and then the mediator sits far away, and they sit at the other end of the table, and the mediator's just there to make sure that things don't go awry. They do almost all the talking. They've role-played, they're in a better state, they want to keep their job. They've even allowed themselves to see this other human being as having talents and abilities, almost always. And then it's actually pretty easy. They find the solutions that work for them. I'm just there to make sure that they're not trying to avoid the issues. And that's fixed simply by saying things like, oh, would you mind telling Paco, I don't know if anyone's name here is Paco, would you mind telling, I've done much of this work in Spanish, would you mind telling Paco about how you saw the issue of the letter? What happened with the letter? And that's it. Oh, yeah, okay. And they start talking about it. They come up with the solutions. They come up with how things are going to work out. And that's it. It's done. The hatchet's buried, and they're done having the problem. But there are lots of mediating, there are lots of different conflict management type models out there. The reason I love this one is, if you all know Luca's story about how he learned German, he had learned English and French already, but with a tutor or at school. But German was the first one he tried on his own. And he got his Agostini book, and he learned German, and it was quite a process. But it wasn't just about learning German. What happened for Luca there was something a lot bigger. He learned how to learn languages on his own. or at least without a teacher. And that's really what this process is about. That, I feel, is one of the biggest strengths. It's not just that we're solving the conflict. It's that we're helping people to learn how to solve conflicts on their own. Because I, as an outside party, I don't know your life. I don't know your industry as well as you do. How am I going to tell you what it is that's going to work for you? And how'd that work out over the long term? You know that. What I do is I just help you through the process of it. So what does this have to do with languages? Well, I think Nelson Mandela can help me with that. When you talk to a man in a language he understands, it goes to his head, which is really what you do a lot here in Europe, right? And even in the Far East, the Chinese and the Koreans and the Japanese get together and they have their summit and they do it in English. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. What's easier, folks? Talking about these things, talking about someone you've grown to hate, someone that is subconsciously to you no longer a human being, what's easier? Talking about that in a second language? One that you speak at a B2 level, B1 level, and in some cases an A2 level? Or talking about that, which is often English, or talking about that in your own, there's a reason we call it mother tongue. There's a reason that these old grandmas or these mothers that are portrayed in films and immigrant families yell at their children in another language, in their own mother tongue. There's something emotionally connected to it. While it is possible to help someone through the reconciliation process in an L2, if you speak their native language, you have a huge edge. You're able to do so much more quickly. The reason that I got brought on into doing this in the first place is because I speak fluent Spanish, and I speak English, and I was living in a region where that was needed. It was not because I had a degree in psychology. And the man who became my mentor said, "Hey, just come to one of my seminars." All right. So even if you don't do this person-to-person type mediation, I mean, you could be like William Ullery. Google him; he's awesome. But he does more of the big stuff. He's helped in among other projects. He helped prevent a revolution from happening in Venezuela, and he helped a revolution come to an end in Indonesia. So whether it's you wanting to facilitate better working relationships or better personal relationships between individuals, or whether it's between companies, or whether it's between countries, if you know the languages of the people that you're working with, this can be a beautiful career for you, because it's another way to bridge that gap that Robert so eloquently talked about. You're bridging that gap linguistically, but you're also bridging that gap emotionally and personally. And even in situations where one party says, "You know what, I just want to quit," that's a good thing, because when a person is feeling like, "Oh no, I hate this other person, I hate this company," they feel like a victim. They feel like they have to stay. When you help them come out of that animal-like mentality and you help them think clearly, even if they choose to leave, and they rarely do, actually, they almost always go through this whole process and come out feeling very good, they're taking back some of their humanity, and they're taking back the direction in their lives. And that's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to close with the words again of Desmond Tutu. When we see others as the enemy, we risk becoming what we hate. When we oppress others, we end up oppressing ourselves. All of our humanity is dependent upon recognizing the humanity in others. And this has a beautiful, and guys, I really think that language learners get this. It could just be me, but I think the language learners get this. When you learn another language, you get inside the mind of a whole other culture. You understand a whole other history. And then you're able to facilitate a reconciliatory process that has a ripple effect that goes beyond what you just see in the workplace or at home or in the family. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. having worked in a number of international multilingual environments myself, I've seen a number of these issues crop up, particularly where people don't appreciate or understand or have experience of different ways of communication in different cultures. And there are certainly lessons that, even if you don't go into this as a career, just aspects of how to deal with these kinds of differences on a personal basis, on your day-to-day, you know, in your day-to-day life, really, when you're talking to other people. The whole listening thing is really, really key. I'd like to open up to a few questions and try and claw back a little bit of time. Hands up. Oh, I see at the back, so you like to get me fit, don't you?
Hi, Ryan.
Hi, man.
I just wanted to comment quickly and then ask one short question.
We do that.
One of my favorite quotes is, every perspective is incomplete, even this one. And the definition of the conflict, whenever you're experiencing a conflict, it's a battle of partial perspectives, because every perspective is incomplete. Yeah, so that was
That's great.
comments.
Yeah, thank you. It's good.
And the question is, I know that Peter Drucker came up with the term knowledge worker. So everyone in the U.S., well, almost everyone in the U.S. is the knowledge worker, and that's why I guess the work that you do is appreciated by the society. I just wanted to find out your opinion. How long do you think it would take, let's say, the third world countries, you know, to develop up to that extent? So countries like I don't know, like Kazakhstan, for example, would at some point appreciate this job. Do you think it's going to take a while? What's your opinion?
It can take a while. It doesn't need to take a while. It only takes as long as people are willing to see that, wait a minute, I can make, okay, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. One of the coolest things about the French Revolution was when they, during that time period, they published the encyclopedia, because they wanted more people to learn how to read. Well, more people were learning how to read. The Parisian dialect is that we now know as French, and they didn't want the common people to be so ignorant. But everybody started to get more well-read, and I think personally that's one of the things that helped propel France forward at that time period. And everybody got smarter. If everybody gets smarter and everybody does better, and we do it right, because we're going to get different perspectives, it's not about avoiding conflict completely. It's about what do we do with the different perspectives, as you put it. So once a third world country makes the realization, once the people who are used to being in charge and have the mentality that, well, there's only so much money out there, and there's only so much honor, and there's only so much glory, and I got to get my piece. When they make the switch to the mentality that, wait a minute, I could actually make a whole lot more money if people around me are making a whole lot more money, or I could have much more influence politically if these people were also more powerful. I mean, isn't that how the EU, when the EU is working at its best, isn't that how it's working? That's how you've been able to, after centuries of wars here in Europe, how is it that you've avoided more? Well, you didn't like how things were in the last big one here, but that's not enough. It's not enough to go, I don't like this. You have to have a method. Part of the process of reconciliation is figuring out, all right, how do both sides get what they want? And when the EU is working at its best, that's what's going on, and that's why you don't have these countries that are bombing each other like they used to. So as soon as a society figures that out, that they can prosper way more, it happens in a generation,
Okay.
or it can never happen.
We'll just do one more question, just because I'm conscious that we're going to be sitting around for 3 hours, and you may all.
I'll be around, folks. I'll be around.
Yeah. So Ryan will be around. But one more question. Yeah, I know. Anyone else for one final question?
A few over here. No, one over here.
Hi.
Hey.
I would wonder if you need a university diploma or study something to get into that job, or like Robert said, the first steps would be 1, 2, 3. Is there any recipe or something like this?
It's a lot like being an interpreter, which I put myself through college doing that, translating and interpreting. So I just like to vouch for everything Robert said. It's fabulous. It's true. I've lived all of that. So it's the same deal. It's a rather underdeveloped academic form of study, but there are programs, there are diplomas you can get. You don't necessarily need one, but it's sure helpful if you want to, make money off of it. A lot of people don't study it. What they do is they study something related. So there are a lot of lawyers who do mediation, do conflict resolution. There are a lot of psychologists who do that. They study something else. They get a broad education, but then they focus on that, and that's all they practice later on because it's really cool. So if you're interested in that, maybe we can talk later about what options are available. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your attention, folks.